Welcome to another episode of Uncommon Entrepreneurs Lunch and Learns. I'm here live with James Shaw today, a successful investor and has a background in product development at Intuit and Uber and other companies, and I'll get more into his bio in a moment. If you are new to tune in, we welcome you to the community. We're based down here in sunny Puerto Rico. Where it has some of the kindest people and best tax incentives, and on top of that, there's just a lot of growth-minded, successful individuals that are abundant. And so, if you missed some of our previous episodes, you're going to be able to tune into YouTube or our Facebook page to watch the reruns. There's some very quality people that I've interviewed that have different backgrounds, etc. And so. Like, subscribe, share. We welcome your feedback. What about these interviews is catching your attention that you want to hear more of? Is there specific themes like real estate or tech or investing or crypto that connects with you and what you're looking for? This is, we're providing this information for you in the community to really get some value out of it. We're all busy. We're all going through these uncertain times at the moment. And, getting key information from knowledgeable people that are experienced in different industries can help your ability to make better decisions and have clear ideas and all that type of mindset. So, getting into it, James Shaw is an experienced cross-functional product development leader in a hyper-growth software O2O international startup. Currently, James is semi-retired and an individual investor with keen interest in crypto and blockchain. James holds an MBA from UCLA Anderson School of Management. James spent most of his career as a software engineer and engineering manager at companies such as Intuit and Uber. At Uber, James led teams and launched products that grew Uber's business in China and Southeast Asia, made the driver app a platform to allow drivers to rent cars to drive for Uber, and built internal products that help Uber hire, retain some of the best talent in the world. James left Uber at the end of 2018 and relocated to Puerto Rico. Since then, he has focused on his personal investment portfolio, investing in crypto projects, VC funds, precious metals, besides traditional equities. In his spare time, he travels around the world and enjoys Puerto Rico's local beaches and hikes. Welcome to the show, James.
Thanks for having me, Drew.
Yeah, you're welcome. So kind of getting into it, I just read your bio, but give some context, kind of like where you come from and how you got where you're at right now.
So I can start from the beginning. My family immigrated to the U.S., California, when I was 12 in middle school, and kind of grew up in California, even went to both the school for bachelor and master's. So after UCSD, where I went for undergrad, I went to work for Intuit for a long time, both at the Silicon Valley and San Diego. That's where TurboTax is in San Diego. And then I felt the need to know more than just tech. I had been an engineer right out of college. So right out of college, I was an engineer for a while, and then felt the need for training in business. So that's why I went to the Anderson School part-time. And during the school, I did a startup. I founded my own startup for 2 years. Wasn't successful, and then moved to the Bay Area and joined Uber instead. So at Uber, it was really a very interesting time for me. I've seen a lot. You probably interview people who went to business school, and you study a lot of cases. And at Uber, probably every week you see something like what you study in business school. There are a lot of things going on. I was an engineer at first, and then became an engineering manager. And like you described, worked in several teams at Uber. I guess the ones relevant to this talk is my experience with the China market and Southeast Asia market when I was working at Uber.
Nice.
And I should probably go on after that. After I was at Uber for 4+ years, I left at the end of 2018 to move to Puerto Rico. So I moved here in January 2019, and just kind of enjoy semi-retired life, investing on my own, managing my own portfolio. As you described, besides equities, I also invest in cryptos and invest in a VC fund, also gold and silver. So right now, kind of just learning myself. I would say, as long as you learn, you don't really need to have a traditional job. I think that's what actually gives people satisfaction in life, learning. So I feel like I can learn as much as I want on whatever I want to learn. So I'm pretty happy. And crypto space is really, really broad, actually. So a lot of people, when they think about cryptos, they think about Bitcoin, but it's a lot more than Bitcoin. So I've been learning about these different crypto projects, and each one is really like a startup. So it's nice to learn about the technology, learn about their business model, and invest in them.
Gotcha. And we'll be covering both those themes during this talk, talking about decentralized finance, DeFi, as well as kind of the crypto space, kind of on the second half of this talk. But good. Appreciate your intro. That's you've had quite a bit of experience, and that, like you said, learning sounds like it's a key part of your life.
Right.
Yeah. How do you learn best? Do you read books? What's your?
Yeah, we were just talking about it. So I think I'm more of an audio person. If it weren't for Audible, I probably would have, quote unquote, read a lot less. So I really appreciate Audible for me to have read quite a few books. And I would say learning by doing is the best way to learn. And that's also what I try to do. I try to watch some of the videos you made about others and try to learn from domain experts. And also, if I can be hands-on, then I'll try to be hands-on.
That's great. And I think a lot of people that are watching can relate, and some can. But I think we all can understand learning new skills can be such a benefit. How do you approach kind of learning something new, and kind of do you anticipate that it's going to take a while, or is there fear, or how do you do it?
It's right now. It's really easy to learn something compared to 10 years ago. So a lot of content is online. So even business school education, when I entered business school, there's a lot of proprietary education. But now even the business school content is in Coursera. You got the best business school professors teaching business. And not to mention other things like programming, cryptos, just anything you can think of is online. You can learn, and Coursera has been good. There are assignments you can do, can even get certificates in things you learn. So I really feel there's been a revolution, and this pandemic, it really has made us rethink education. It doesn't have to be in a classroom. It doesn't have to be in person. I do think, probably through K-12, you probably do need in person to kind of get those basic knowledge. But past that, I feel people can really learn on their own. Those who are really disciplined, they can learn things on their own. There's just abundance of resources online. And some of them are interactive. Like I said, you can do assignments. You can have people look at your work. And in terms of programming, there's no better time to learn programming nowadays. Actually, right now it's very easy to release an app. So kind of going back to learning by doing, what I said earlier, the best way to learn iOS programming, for example, is just to release an app. That will help you land a job too. When interviewers can see your work. So I would say right now it's kind of the best time for people who want to learn, and it kind of equalizes everyone in the world. People in maybe not first world countries, they have a lot more access to education, and education is key to lift yourself, your family to a higher level. So I really think there's a revolution in learning.
Interesting. Appreciate your feedback. That's I'm sure we all can relate on that. So getting into it, you have a presentation, the cross-border product development hyper growth startup.
Yeah,
that's a mouthful, but it says a lot. And what is it? And we'll turn the mic over to you to kind of go through it for 15 to 20 minutes. I think there's going to be a lot of value.
So I want to present what I presented to the Taiwanese entrepreneurial community a while back, actually, a condensed version of it. And the presentation is about building products for the overseas market. So Taiwan is kind of like Puerto Rico in that its internal market is kind of small. So if you build a product, most likely you're selling it to another market. In Puerto Rico's case, probably the U.S. mainland or Latin America. Same with Taiwan. So this presentation hopefully will be helpful for founders who want to found a tech startup to build products in Puerto Rico for markets outside Puerto Rico. I don't know if they can see my slide now. Okay. Yeah, so these are my experiences at Uber. And like I said earlier, the first two are the most relevant. Basically, we had the product development team in SF, the headquarters, to develop products in the China market and the Southeast Asia market. So it would be like, if you have the product development team in San Juan and you're developing for US mainland or Latin America. In fact, if you're an Act 20 company, your customers have to be outside of Puerto Rico. So a lot of the non-tech co-founders, they think I just hire engineers and products will be magically built, but it's not that simple. You need the right kinds of people on your product development team. You need the engineers to build the product, of course, but these days you also need the designers to build the user experience and user interface. Especially now, the barrier to entry for product development is so low. Really, user experience is a differentiation for products. Besides that, you also need data analysts to analyze user usage on your products to see if you have met your KPIs or key performance indicators. Really, everything you do, everything you build should be measured, and that's what the data analysts are for. And if you're building an O2O kind of product or online to offline product like ride-hailing or delivery, then you also need operations people on the ground to make sure the offline experience of your product is also smooth. So a lot of times these functions are led by a PM and an EM. A PM stands for product manager, and in a small startup, it could be the CEO. EM stands for engineering manager and could be the CTO in a small startup. So let's drill down to the engineering roles. So if your product has front end, and most do, and if it's mobile, then you would need an Android engineer for Android and iOS for iOS. If it's web, then React and Node.js are kind of trendy technologies right now for building web user interface. Most important of all, your front-end engineer has to have passion in UX and UI and can double as the designer if you don't have a designer. And we all know how much startups churn. So it's good to have overlapping skill set in your team. For back-end engineer, if you're expecting your startup to move fast, then you want to adopt a scripting language like Python, but you also want to make sure your engineer can program in a compiled language such as Golang or C. Like any good engineer would tell you, if an engineer doesn't know a compiled language, they don't really know what's going on behind the scenes. And to move fast, you want to leverage third-party and open source code as much as possible. And just like with the front-end engineers, you want the back-end engineers to be well-versed in databases and can actually double as a data analyst. In other words, if you don't have a data analyst, they can analyze the data and tell you the KPIs. So after you have assembled a team, then you want a good development process to make your product development really like a well-oiled machine. And there's really no right process. It's whatever that works for your team. And your team has to have buy-in of the process. From my experience, for a 3 to 4 months MVP type of product, minimal viable product type of product, a mini waterfall with Gantt chart is good enough. What you do is you have a week for each column and you have a task for each role with priority. And then you fill in the cells with the engineer working on the task. So just from one glance, you can see who works on what, when, and you can see the whole progress of the project. It's good for, like I said, MVP, something that needs to be rushed out the door fast, but a more sustainable development process for V2, I would say for V2 or incremental type of project, a Scrum-Bun, what's called Scrum-Bun or Scrum plus Kanban engineering process would be good. So Kanban is actually a manufacturing process, and it has these buckets. Scrum is an agile software development process and involves cycles called sprint, and you can define how long your sprints are. Say if you have a 2-week sprint, then at the beginning of the 2 weeks, the whole team will sit down and then move work items from the backlog bucket to the in current sprint bucket. And these work items were put in by the PM first. And the whole team would decide on which work items to work on in these 2 weeks. And they also size the efforts of those work items in terms of points. And during the sprint, during the 2 weeks, the engineers will pick up the work items and move them to the in progress, blocked, or ready for review buckets. At the end of the sprint, engineer would present to the stakeholder. It could be another team, that depends on your team, on those completed work items, and the PM would sign off on those completed ones and move them to the done bucket. So the whole thing is very structured. It's also quantitative. So at the end of the sprint, you know how many points you have put into the sprint and how many you actually have completed. And for example, if we just put in 30 points and completed 20, we know in the next sprint, we probably shouldn't assign that many points. And also over time, you can track how well your team is doing in terms of productivity. If you see your team can handle way more points, that means your team is becoming more productive. So a key thing to remember in software development is also to divide up a large feature into multiple shippable milestones. This is best illustrated with an example. So we did a project called Face ID. It's actually different from the Face ID that Apple has in the iPhones. We actually did it before Apple, and they just happen to have our code name as their feature later. So it's to solve a problem where the drivers in China were defrauding Uber by impersonating others to drive for Uber to get the incentives. So it was during a time when Uber and Didi were locked in a heated war to get market share. So both offer a lot of driver incentives for drivers to drive for them. So you got these fraudsters who got a hold of personal data of other people and signed them up to impersonate them to drive for Uber. Or it could be just an Uber driver that passed off their phone to their buddy without driver license to drive to get more incentive. So our solution was to require the driver to take a selfie before they take a rider request. And if the selfie mismatches their driver license photo, then the driver app would not allow them to take that request. So as you can imagine, this is a huge feature, and we broke it down into multiple milestones. First, we verified the facial recognition vendor APIs work well with our existing data to make sure it's effective in terms of false positives and false negatives. Then we integrate the API calls into the driver app in the fashion I described. But then we know that these fraudsters, they already have the driver photos of the people they impersonate. So they could just take a picture of the driver photo to get past the check. So we added a liveness detection as the last milestone to ask them to nod their head, to blink their eyes, to make sure the selfie is a selfie of a live object rather than a still photo. So that's an example of breaking down a large feature into multiple milestones, and at the end we were pretty successful and reduced the fraud rate by tenfold. Other good engineering process to go by include, like I said, celebrating engineering achievements with sprint demos. That's really when engineers shine. So you want to motivate them by letting them have that visibility. Another good one to have is postmortems. So inevitably you will have outage of your service. And when that happens, you want to ask 5 whys to reach the root cause and to make sure the root cause doesn't happen again. And you want to make sure it's blameless. It's just to make sure the root cause doesn't happen again via changing process or whatever mitigation measures you come up with. Another good one is monitoring and alerting of the health of your products in production. And this is probably best illustrated with an example as well. So I bank with these crypto banks where I deposit cryptos and they would send me interest payment. But all of a sudden, one day, I stopped receiving interest payment. So it turned out they changed their system. They updated their system so that anybody who had a PR or Puerto Rico in the state, in the address, would not get interest payments. So, of course, I contacted the support and took several days to get someone to respond to me, and took another few days for them to contact development to fix the bug. So the whole thing took a few weeks, and I almost decided to leave that bank. Decided to withdraw all my cryptos from that bank. But if they had proper monitoring and alerting, they would have caught this before the customer, did. So if they, for example, if they monitored on the number of interest recipients, and if that number dropped, because this happened to all the Puerto Rico customers, if that number dropped, they could alert their development team and they can investigate why before customers have to complain about it. So these stats are very important, and there are some product-specific stats, like in that case, interest payment recipients, or they can also be the traditional system uptime, throughput kind of stat, and it would be nice to have a dashboard so all managers, and in fact everyone on the team, should pay attention to those dashboards. And there are even third-party software companies like PagerDuty that will trigger an alert on people's phones when those stats pass a certain threshold. And a good practice is to have an on-call engineer all the time. So basically, your engineering team, everyone would rotate to be the on-call engineer to tackle any production alerts from PagerDuty, or could be triggered by your support people if it's urgent. Finally, last but not least, a good practice to release a feature is to do staged rollout. So after you dog food your change and you want to release it, you first release it to 5% or 10% of your user base. You don't release it to 100% of your user base all at once to see if there's any production issues. And if there are no production issues, then you bump it up to 50-50. Then you can test 50% of your population with the feature and 50% without, to see if the ones with the feature really hit your KPIs. So that's what A/B testing is. So this is really important. Otherwise, you're really building blind. You don't know whatever you build is really effective. So some words about people management. Engineers are driven by tech. They always want to use the latest and greatest technologies, sometimes at the expense of development time. So you want to strike a good balance. Engineers, to be honest, they might leave your team or your company if they're not learning the latest technologies. But at the same time, you don't want to delay your project. The best way is to expose engineers to customers as much as possible, so that they know the scope of the problem, so that they don't over-engineer. And by doing that, you motivate the engineers, and they can also think of ideas to solve the problem. Engineers value meritocracy, so when you reward them, you need to reward accordingly. And also, a very good book for any manager, I would say, is Multipliers. It was kind of a must-read at Uber. The idea is that when you're a leader, you're not just directing your team what to do, but you're also making sure everyone on your team reach their highest potential, being the best they can be, growing their success. So it's a changing mindset. It's not about directing people what to do, but growing them, making sure they do the best job they can. So finally, beware of cultural differences of people on your team. People from different cultural backgrounds may have different motivation, ways of motivating them. Now imagine your product is a hit. You got a lot of users, and you want to develop more features or even more products in adjacent markets. How do you scale your product development team? So the way Uber does it is by having small teams with a lot of autonomy. So Uber is organized functionally, like a lot of companies. So engineers roll out to report to CTO and PM data. designer folks roll up to report to another head. So, but it's important to note that the engineering head and the PM head should be different because naturally there's a tension between engineer and PM. But the data folks and designer folks, it's okay for them to roll up to the same head because they're complementary to a PM. A good PM really should be data driven and have design sense. And then you want to group your product families. So you have product family teams, and in Uber we had what's called program and platform teams. A program team is a product family team focused on one area. For example, the new mobility program team would have products in the scooter, the bike, basically the new types of mobility. I was in the China growth program team, and we were responsible for products launched in the China market. And I was later in the talent product program team, and we were responsible for internal products to help recruiting and retention. And these vertical program teams are supported by horizontal platform teams that are shared among different program teams. For example, we will have a reusable, or not reusable, but shared user directory service for any program service to look up any driver, rider, or eater. And then there will be a shared rollout and A/B testing service to dynamically configure the rollout percentage, like I mentioned before, for A/B testing. So you organize by product family, and then each product family you would have multiple microservices of 3 to 5 engineers, like I mentioned before, 1 or 2 front end and 1 or more back end. And each of these services are pretty much independently developed, but you want to have oversight of to make sure that they don't duplicate efforts. And for O2O type of company, that's kind of autonomous to city teams, the microservices on the dev side. Yeah, I guess this slide is mostly about if you have folks on the ground. The important thing to notice is that if you have an O2O type of product and you need folks on the ground, you want to have really good communication between folks on the ground and your product development team, because in my experience, some of the best ideas to grow the market come from the local ops, or the local folks in the market. They know the market the best, and they know what can be done in the product to grow that market, to grow your market share. Yeah, these are some examples, and I was involved in many of these. In fact, Uber values so much on this feedback loop that they even invented a role called product ops, whose responsibility is to synthesize feedback and ideas from ops to product. And when your product development team should also visit the market often. So when I was in China Growth, we would make trips to China, and we would see the market, experience the product there, and help fix any bugs. This is really important because, especially Android, a lot of times where you develop, it works fine on the few Android handsets you have. But in China, for example, there are like hundreds of different Android devices, and it would not work there. So it's really important that you experience the product in the local market and help fix any local bugs. Yeah, and finally, as much as possible, you want to blur the line of time zone differences between your target market and your product development team. So in our case, we had a Telegram channel that the ops in China could even ping us anytime. Actually, ping the on-call engineer anytime. So we really blurred the line between the different time zones. So hopefully those are good information for people who want to build tech products in general, and for a overseas market specifically.
That was great. I think
Thanks.
if that really walked us through what your experience, and that's just the wisdom gained from being on the front line and being in Southeast Asia. And what's maybe one of your biggest takeaways from heading that team and working at such a hyper growth company like Uber?
Biggest takeaway, I learned a lot. I would say, back to what I was saying in the beginning, I would say learning is the fuel of life. If you feel you're not learning, don't hesitate to leave that environment. I know a lot of people, they're stuck in 8 to 5 jobs, or for paycheck. But I would say try to balance that with learning, because life is short. You really wanna learn, and you'll get enjoyment out of it, and more often than not, you'll also be rewarded financially.
Yeah, that's great. So pivoting subjects, keep the questions coming in too. We'll be watching that as we're going through it. So switching to blockchain and crypto and decentralized finance, DeFi, and kind of that theme, the two of us seem we relate with understand like that the blockchain crypto world right now is like the 1990s in the internet, where we're pre-Mozilla. The user
Yes.
experience is not as great.
You're betraying your age.
Yeah,
By the way.
exactly. Well, but I think the correlation is so good, and it's a new technology, so people are still wrapping their minds around it. I want you to get into more of like the UI and UX experience and how that could improve, and that's maybe one of the catalysts for maybe the growth around people not being there yet, etc. So maybe just to start off with, like, what is your belief in the space, and where do you see it's going in the next 2 to 5 years?
Yeah, so I would say the main value proposition of cryptos is disintermediation. So right now we have a lot of central authorities. The banks, they hold your money. Now even Uber, you can say it's a central authority or central figure that mediate between riders and drivers. So the crypto blockchain space really makes it possible to disintermediate. Not in all, I think not in all industries, but in some industries like banking. I think kind of going back to what I said about cryptos is more than Bitcoin. There's, I guess one huge thing about crypto is Ethereum. That's really a distributed computer, and with a distributed computer, you can really have any kind of application. So not to get into too much detail. So basically, blockchain is you can think of it as a database that are immutable, and nodes can join the network in and out, so you cannot shut it down. And because of that, it kind of can replace the central authority that I was talking about. So what I'm excited about most recently is the DeFi space of cryptos. And really, there are many applications of crypto, and DeFi is just one of them. There's cryptos for advertising, there's cryptos for gaming and supply chain and all kinds of industries. But DeFi seems to be the most developed right now in the crypto space. Just talking from personal experience, I think DeFi could be kind of the Netscape moment for cryptos, like what you were talking about. Netscape basically made the internet accessible to a wide audience. People started accessing the internet with that browser, and then you have e-commerce and all that. So I think DeFi could be that for crypto space. I think one important reason is there are these tokens called stablecoins. So they basically, some are hard pegged and some are loosely or soft pegged, but basically they represent dollars. So it's kind of an easy transition for people who are banking, normally, with Bank of America or whatever, to switch to one of those crypto banks I was talking about with the stable coins. And the benefits you get is the speed of cryptos. You can transfer your stable coin to another party in a matter of few minutes, large amount. Things normally that you'd have to wire. Even wiring takes a few hours. And one thing inherent about crypto is just, there's no, I guess there's no border control. Hopefully, it's really impossible to do it because, how do you prevent people from remembering their keys, right? But yeah, but anyway, I would say crypto banks, they're probably, I think they're in the best position to replace the traditional banking sector. And that's what I use, and I know a lot of people are using it. And then on top of that, there's also a decentralized version of that, uh, DeFi. That's what DeFi is, and where so Compound is a good example. It's a protocol that lets you lend and borrow without that central authority. So yeah, so I would say the DeFi world or decentralized DApps, they call it DApps, decentralized applications, are still kind of very young. I think we need a bridge, kind of like a centralized authority, kind of like BlockFi, Celsius, Crypto.com, that that are kind of in the middle to help people transition to the decentralized world. And like you said, there are a lot of problems. There are a lot of problems with usability in the decentralized space that need to be worked on, that need to be improved. And even the centralized versions of these apps, there's a lot to be improved in terms of usability. For decentralized versions, basically everything you do, you have to pay gas. That's how Ethereum, I guess, one of the benefits of holding Ethereum, people use it for operations because it's a virtual computer. So anytime you have any kind of peer to contract type of operation, then you need to pay gas for Ethereum. And so it just makes it very user unfriendly. So everything you do, you need to pay some gas, and sometimes even makes it not worthwhile. So for example, I was staking some synthetics tokens, and basically the staking reward I get is less, or I think about the same as a gas fee. So what's the point of staking it then? So I think we have a long way to go in the decentralized side of cryptos, but I think the centralized part of cryptos is like centralized exchanges like Binance and those crypto banks I was talking about. They're moving quite a long way.
That's great. So talking like, what are some of the features, if somebody's not as familiar with the space, that that have these banking and the interest, and what's attractive from your perspective to want to be customer?
So what's attractive? So one thing I already mentioned, you can transfer pretty large amount of money in terms of stablecoin to anybody, even to outside the country. And compare that with traditional banking, it takes longer, and you might get questions. I haven't tried it myself. I haven't tried like transferring hundreds of thousands of dollars from my Bank of America account. I guess I did it once, and it took a while. But you might raise questions, more when you do that. So that's one advantage. It's the speed, and the interest rate is higher right now. So with Celsius, it's over 8%. Right now, you barely get anything from checking accounts, even treasuries. You don't get that much. Of course, it's not FDIC insured, so that's a difference. But like pre FDIC days, you look at the counterparty. In my case, I spread my bet among different crypto banks. You really, it's kind of almost in a way being responsible in a free market. FDIC, you can say, kind of counters that, but you kind of look at who you want to deal with, and then you diversify, you kind of spread your bet. So higher interest, ease of transferring funds. Those are the advantages I can think of.
Got it. Yeah, sounds good. So where do you see the space going in general in the next 2 to 5 years? If nobody knows the answers, however, as we're projecting on how this could play out with the analogy of the internet, people out there, have they already missed the boat? That's a lot of times people have. Where do you see 2 to 5 year horizon?
I hope decentralized versions of these applications or DApps really take off. in 2 to 5 years. Right now, like I said, the experience is kind of clunky. You get charged gas, anything you do, and a lot of times, one user experience, you do multiple things, and each time you're charged gas. Yeah, it's just not, and you have to make sure you have enough Ethereum, Ether in your account to be charged. So I hope things are improved in 2 to 5 years, so that people really migrate to decentralized versions of these apps. With the centralized versions of these apps, like Binance or these crypto banks, you still have the risk of them running away with your money. So with the decentralized version, the risk you have is the contract. It's peer to contract, so the smart contract. Basically, if there's a coding error, of course, if there's a bug, then you lose your money. But I hope in 2 to 5 years we move more to a P2C world.
That's great. Yeah. So I think, kind of in wrapping up, I think your takeaways on the space is definitely on point. Any last kind of thing you would suggest from somebody out there that's maybe not in the space that they should be mindful of in the crypto world?
Yeah, like I said, I think the crypto banks are likely the killer app, like Netscape was for the internet. So it's very easy. I went through it last year. Buy stable coins from, say, Coinbase. Transfer your fiat to stable coins, and there are different stable coins too. So you kind of want to do your research on which ones stay as close to the peg, 1-to-1 to the dollar, as much as as possible. And there are differences between those with actual backing of the dollars and those that are algorithmic, kind of like DAI. Yeah, you want to do your research on what stablecoin you want to use. Personally, I use as USDC, and you might even want to diversify your stablecoin holdings in case one really, like the ones backed by dollars, ran away with your money. But basically, I would say banking is the killer app right now, and people can really try it out. They can change a small amount of their fiat to stablecoin. Say Coinbase, open up a Coinbase account, buy stable coins, and then once you have the stable coins, then you can try out these one of these crypto banks, these centralized crypto banks. You'll get much higher interest, like I said, over 8%. And then once you're comfortable with that, try one of those decentralized versions of these crypto banks. Unfortunately, they don't offer as high of an interest rate right now, so might not be a good time to try it now. But I would say that's the progression I went through, and that's what I recommend people.
Yeah, that's good. There's a major difference between centralized and decentralized that you've clearly explained, which gives its advantages. So that's good. Appreciate you coming on and dropping, the wisdom you did, and we'll be tuning in. So like, share, subscribe. If you know somebody that would find value in this information, pass it along, and put comments below on additional content that you want to hear from, and what you're really getting out of this, and we'll tailor it to your what people are looking for. So signing off. We have another one on Friday with Jose with Agro Beads that you're going to want to check out, and we'll be tuning in.
All right, cool.
Yeah,
Thanks.